here I am 1 year from college and I tear my ACL. They're telling me I'm not going to be able to play college football, and I'm thinking, that sucks. Team Rehab comes along and says, hey, let's get to work. They don't rely on routine programs. It was all about me and my dream to play again. Now I'm visiting Ivy League schools, and oh yeah, I'll be playing. I could have given up. I'm glad I went to Team Rehab because they didn't. Team works.
Team Rehabilitation. Visit team-rehab.com.
To move forward with conviction, vision matters. We are Forvis, a forward-thinking professional services firm that uses our unmatched vision to prepare for what's ahead. Our commitment to forward vision is delivered on an expanded platform and driven by deep industry expertise, vast resources, and innovative advisory services. Forward vision, it's in our actions and our name.
My favorite part about working in the warehouse is just the opportunity to come down every day and feel the equipment that's getting packed up. Really see the equipment go from something that someone's dreamed about having at a youth program to something that they're actually going to be able to give to their kids. Good Sports works with equipment manufacturers to take in donations of excess equipment that they have. Everything ranging from soccer balls, footballs, basketballs, to workout equipment and training equipment. We then take that equipment and we are able to distribute it to youth programs and schools across the country. Equipment vendors are the lifeblood of what Good Sports does. Without their support every year, we wouldn't be able to do what we do.
They're providing us with the ability to be able to service organizations throughout the country. Through their generosity, a lot of kids benefit in the long run.
Our team has grown exponentially recently. It's because of all our great partnerships with our equipment vendors and with the community organizations.
The growth means that Good Sports is servicing more kids, more organizations. Our inventory continues to grow, and so does Good Sports.
I've worked for a lot of really large organizations where values were fancy words on a pretty poster. At SCA Health, that is the striking difference. We live and breathe those every day.
They are always talking about patient care, high quality care. I've never heard of a company talk so much about their patients.
It is a company that consistently looks to improve. All I want to do is more for a company that takes care of me like that.
My voice is getting heard. I make a difference where I work. What input I have, they're looking at and they're listening to.
If you want quality of life, if you want room for growth, and if you want to be in a place where you know that you're safe and you know that you're keeping your patients safe, I would recommend it.
Putting in the work at SCA means being recognized. The promotions are there, the education is there, the next steps are there. I'm proof that the resources, the encouragement, the mentorship is there.
I've been here 11 years. It is the SCA values that have kept me here.
It's one of the first companies I worked for that has invested in me.
I come to work every day and I know things are going to go well.
I mean, it's the best company I've ever worked for.
They allow me to be who I am. I couldn't ask for anything more.
Over the last several decades, we at Midwest Orthopedics at Rush have depended upon our donors to help fortify our investment in translational research. Translational research is our ability to identify a problem in the clinic, take it to the laboratory, and bring it back to you, the patient, and affect change and improve the quality and outcomes of your care.
A lot of times we don't even see the benefits of our research come to the light of day in the clinical setting. With the use of donor funding, we've been able to accelerate a lot of that. And one example is with personalized medicine, where we're taking patients' blood, spinning it down, and taking different factors out of it to treat different conditions in ways that we really never had available to us in the past. And this is a way to really move things forward and offer different options to patients that didn't exist before.
Through the generosity of our donors over the years, we truly have had one of the greatest impacts of any department in the country and had this effect both nationally and internationally. So thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to episode 1 of the Chicago Sports Summit. I'm Dr. Brian Cole, managing partner of Midwest Orthopedics at Rush, head team physician for the Chicago Bulls, co-team physician for the Chicago White Sox and the Chicago Dogs. I'm also the director of the Chicago Sports Summit. Thank you for joining us, and to those who have supported this initiative over the years. In addition to tonight's episode, we will be broadcasting 5 more episodes, one each Tuesday night at 7 p.m. through November 8th. Like tonight, each will feature a brief conversation with an interesting person in sports. It will include people in sports marketing and sports business. All conversations will be hosted by Chicago sports media and superstars. Check out chicagosportsummit.com for dates and to see the all-star lineup for the Chicago Sports Summit. This summit benefits organizations near and dear to our hearts. Proceeds from this year's summit will go to the national organization with a significant Chicago presence called Good Sports. They provide sports equipment and resources to underserved Chicago students. This year's summit will also benefit orthopedic research at Rush. This will help keep more of us pain-free and active to participate in the activities that we enjoy. Donations to support these important causes are now being taken on our website. Now I'd like to take a moment to thank our presenting sponsors who have helped us by providing generous funding for this year's summit. Please meet Team Rehab and Leopardo.
Thank you, Dr. Cole. As a physical therapy company with locations in Illinois and Indiana, we are honored to care for your orthopedic patients. Together, we are getting people back to doing what they love. We are proud to be the presenting sponsor of the 2022 Chicago Sports Summit.
Leopardo Companies is proud to be a presenting sponsor of the summit for the 6th year. As a construction and development company, we enjoy working alongside Dr. Cole and his team building new locations for better patient care and access.
Thank you very much. For a full list of our incredible sponsors, please visit chicagosportsummit.com. Now I'd like to introduce one of my teammates and partners, Dr. Jordan Consien. He will introduce our guests for tonight's episode.
Thanks, Brian. I'm Jordan Consien, a sports medicine surgeon at Midwest Orthopedics at Rush. I'm thrilled to introduce the stars of our first Summit episode. Matt Kalish is the president and co-founder of DraftKings and has changed the way we interact with sports. He has created an international platform for sports betting, fantasy teams, NFT sales, and lots more. He leveraged his business background in Boston College MBA to create a company that now sits with a multi-billion-dollar valuation. Talking with Matt tonight is popular journalist Danny Ecker from Crain. He has covered everything from general business to real estate to sports. We think he's the perfect person to talk with Matt tonight. Let's get the conversation started.
Thanks, it's great to be here, and I'm joined now with Matt Kalish, the co-founder of DraftKings. Matt, good to be with you. Let's start this conversation by setting the scene of sports betting in the United States. DraftKings has become one of the household names. It's now legal, sports betting, in about 36 states across the United States. This has been a wave of legalization since 2018 when the Supreme Court opened the door to all this. Here in Illinois, we've been legal for 3 years. Back in March, we just set a new record where it was almost $1 billion bet on sports here, obviously helped by March Madness. Take me back to the origins briefly of DraftKings and how hard it's been to get to this point, over the last decade or so. And where are we now in the trajectory of sports betting in the United States?
Yep. Okay. Great to be with you today. Looking forward to the conversation. 10 years ago, if you were a sports fan in the U.S., there was fairly limited ways that you could really, jump into games, predict things, especially if you wanted something on the line to make it a little more interesting. And I would say, aside from like in Las Vegas, if you were at a casino, at a sports book, there really wasn't much there. Maybe you played a season-long league on ESPN, or maybe you had an office pool that you did, like a squares pool for the Super Bowl and things like that. But for the most part, there wasn't a lot going on. And back in 2011, my partners, Jason and Paul, and I started working on DraftKings nights, weekends out of, at the time what was Paul's apartment in Watertown, Mass. he had an extra room. Jason and I didn't have any space, so he had the, I guess, first headquarters of DraftKings. And at the time we worked together in corporate America at Vistaprint. And on the side, really, though, we had this ambition around, like, we wanted to do something entrepreneurial in sports. And we all had the same hobbies. Like, we liked to play fantasy, we liked poker, we liked games that were, like, not easily mastered, that were, like, a little complicated, complex, where you could, like, predict things, see if you're right. So fantasy was perfect, and like our initial foray with DraftKings was daily fantasy, which was like you get to do the draft every day and you get to compete against a bunch of people. So we thought we were really bringing the best part of the season-long fantasy experience into like the everyday experience with daily. And also being able to do that for real money against lots of people, that added this extra layer of things that I think appealed to like a really broad audience, but, not necessarily day one. I would say when we launched, it was, thousands of people playing, and then it eventually grew into tens and hundreds and then millions, of people. So over the course of time and, through partnerships, through, working with the leagues, teams, advertising, just like getting the word out, I think we really were able to grow a pretty big audience initially with daily fantasy. Then as fortune turned out, like sports betting ended up, through the repeal of PASPA in 2018, like that became much more on the table. We never really expected, like maybe one day, but we never really expected that to come. And it wasn't until that Supreme Court case popped up in the news late 2017 that it was even on our radar that maybe sports betting would be a thing in the US. But once that came up, then we were kind of like very quick moving on it.
Right, and now you have the kind of branding. This is a household name. People have heard about it, or they've seen the commercials at some point. Maybe they've made bets. Where do you think we are? I mean, now as we see the number of people betting on sports nationwide, or at least doing it legally now, are we still kind of in early days of this, do you feel like, where there's still a lot of people to reach and you guys are just scratching the surface on this? What inning are we in this game?
It's still quite early, I would say. We're with our mobile app at DraftKings, we're in 17 states. Soon Kansas actually will be launching. That'll be number 18. That's imminent. There's a few other states too. There's been great legislative momentum. So states like Massachusetts, Ohio, Maryland, they've all passed bills and they're just kind of pending the regulation, the process. And so more and more states keep passing the bill. But as we sit here now, we're about 36% of the US population have access to the mobile sportsbook. And then there's a few markets that just do retail or like physical sports books. And so we're in a few of those, like Mississippi, for example.
Has it been harder than you thought it would be to get states to buy into legalization? I mean, this is a lot of legwork. I've just tracking DraftKings and the other big players in this space, pushing for this for years and years, and there's still states, in some cases, pushing back. What are you finding now? Are there still obstacles in the way to get people, politicians, anyone on board? And what ways are you finding to be effective in getting people to say, hey, let's legalize this. This is something people are doing anyway?
Well, I'd say the overall effort has been tremendously successful, especially if you compare it to anything else that, especially state by state, anything else that states are trying to get done. Often, there's so many priorities, so many things that the state houses are trying to do. The way that kind of bills get passed in each state, often it's different. There's different stakeholders. There's different groups of people who have like the most influence or who kind of weigh in the most on different issues. So I'd say every state is unique, and it's sort of like a snowflake. But the overall issue is so popular that I think there's been a lot of momentum, and I'd say the popularity really comes down to first, like voters typically support sports betting bills very heavily. Mm-hmm. So it's like over 2/3 of voters in the most recent referendums were supportive of legal regulated sports betting. And so it's very popular. And then it also helps generate tax revenue. It helps, create jobs in the state. And then it also, I think, serves to really protect consumers from offshore black market operators that, if there's an alternative that's legal, regulated, where there's oversight, where there's best-in-class kind of consumer protection, all that stuff is popular. So I would say it's sort of a matter of time when states will pass sports betting for the most part, when it come up in the priorities, not if. And I'd say like our home state of Mass was a great example, where for just years and years, everybody was, the kind of most influential people in the state house, the governor, everybody was calling for it. And the process, though, can just take time. So it took a couple years, but there was always support, I felt like, and it was more just like minor things getting in the way of getting it fully done, you know?
Right, and now there's peer pressure, right? Because all these other states, hey, don't you want to be, the people are betting in other states, and there's revenue to be made, obviously. So with the growth of this is a very crowded market. There are a lot of players. I was looking the other day, I think I have 6 sports betting apps on my phone. How do you stand out from the crowd here? Obviously, people know some of the big names, DraftKings, FanDuel, others that have popped up and advertised a lot. What have you guys found to be effective ways to really separate yourselves? And how important is it to get people, first-time users, when they do make their first bets? We see all these promotions, all these bonuses and free money to try to acquire customers. It seems like we're in sort of this wild customer acquisition era.
Yeah, every new state, there's this typical, I guess, curve of things where everybody's launching, and anytime a new product launches, there's always like a more intense marketing period. And then once it's more adopted, it typically gets a little bit more, I would say, settled down. And so depending on when a state launched, there's sometimes more or less, I would say, like marketing activity. It's also really seasonal. So at the peak times, such as right now, football season's launching. We have baseball in season, not too far from NBA and hockey, and like everything is kind of like seasonally peaking right around the end of September, early October, whatever. And so I'd say that's also like a seasonally heavy period where more customers are just active in general, And so it's a little bit of both in terms of that. DraftKings is first or second in every state pretty much that we operate. So we are like right in the mix. And I think what's different about DraftKings is we're very focused on the US sports betting consumer. Like our main market is US by far. We're also operating in Canada, but we're very focused in kind of like this very concentrated area. And our company's pretty different than most of the competitors in the sense of, like a FanDuel Sportsbook, for example, say is our top competitor. They're, it was probably like 4 or 5 years ago, their brand was acquired by Flutter, which is the biggest gambling company in the world. It's like decades old. They have probably like 15 brands. It's, Flutter have like Paddy Power, Betfair. You go down the list of some of the biggest European gambling brands. It's like a giant conglomerate, And so they have all this experience. DraftKings had 0 experience 4 years ago. So it's not exactly the same in terms of like heritage, but what we do have is 10-year-old customer relationships from fantasy, and we have a lot of insight, I think, into the US consumer specifically. So we're not necessarily just trying to kind of like launch a custom experience in each market where it's like this brand is good here, this brand's good there. We're like all in on US, all in on DraftKings, and like very focused on like winning in this specific, part of the world.
Yeah. Let's talk about your presence in Chicago. A lot of Chicago sports fans know DraftKings and the Cubs are building a sports book at Wrigley Field set to open next year, I believe. How important is Chicago for DraftKings? And how big a deal is this big sports book at Wrigley Field going to be for the brand and for awareness and making a bigger splash in this market?
I think it's a pretty meaningful addition to the area. First, I think it's being a part of what's going on in Wrigleyville at all is a huge deal. It's not something that we've ever really taken lightly. That opportunity to be a part of the experience of going to a Cubs game, going to Wrigley Field. There's like a century of history there, and so like introducing a new element to that, I think, is certainly something that we took very seriously, and we only wanted to do a project under the circumstances that it would just be like A+ experience across the board and really additive. And so the build out, the venue, we haven't rushed. It's like everything is just A+. I've seen, just rendering after rendering, example after example of just the quality and how I think immaculate it will be when open. And sometime next year when the doors open, I think hundreds, thousands of people every game day will stroll in, choose to kind of pick a team. I'm sure they'll bet the Cubs pretty much. It's what we see is people like to support the home team typically. And I think it will add that extra little bit of excitement to the game. Like there'll be a percent of people in the stands who are, now they're sweating some bet, some prediction they made, and it'll just amplify the experience, I think, and the energy.
Well, that's the other thing too. I mean, I think the in-stadium experience and how betting becomes a part of that we haven't seen that. It's been a thing for a long time in Europe and other places around the world, but having in-stadium betting is still pretty new here in the United States. How do you manage that so that betting becomes a complement to the game, not cannibalizing the experience of for a family going to Wrigley Field, for example, who has kids, and they're like, well, look, a lot of people like betting as part of their game day experience, but some just don't want that in their face. Some of that's maybe for the teams to manage, but how mindful are you guys about that when you're going and creating a sports book at this classic stadium that people go do for the experience, perhaps as a family?
Yeah, I'd say super mindful. Everything, it's not like accessible except behind closed doors. It'd be like entering a bar, basically. Like children don't just stroll into a bar and sit up there and there's some standards around like what is acceptable in terms of even just like being in the space, And I don't think it's for everyone, but what I will say about sports betting and even fantasy sports and a lot of other like prediction games that you can play around sports is typically it grow the audience very meaningfully. Like the reason why teams, leagues, media companies, athletes, etc., all are supportive of sports betting and are integrating that more into the experiences because not only is it popular with current fans, but it also grow the audience very meaningfully. And there's just so much evidence and data of that expansion. And so it creates sort of new fans that maybe they were like loosely interested and now they're very interested because they can predict things, and that's just like part of the brain that they like to exercise. It creates deeper engagement, like more frequent game watching. People will stick around till the end of games more often, like lots of amplification to like what it means to be a fan. And so I think you'll just see like more intensity and maybe a bit of a bigger like cohort of people showing up to the game.
Right. Now my wife, who will not watch sports with me, if she has some money on the line, she will. So that's a big difference. Growing the audience, getting casual fans in like that. We've seen media partnerships in a big way from DraftKings, FanDuel. FanDuel just launched their own TV network, or is launching theirs. Give me a sense of the partnerships that DraftKings has done with big media outlets, teams, leagues, to be able to get the word out, and how important it is to try to be part of that mainstream sports conversation, not just, that's different from what I want in my sports. Betting is just a part of the mainstream discussion around sports.
Yeah, I'd say we have very few that are as deep as our relationship with the Cubs, which has been, even before sports betting, we were partners in daily fantasy. And then over the years that expanded, into sports betting and then now into the retail kind of business now. So that constant deepening of the relationship with the Cubs, I'd say, is an example of a bigger type of relationship for us. I'd say it's only rivaled by maybe like Patriots would be a similar scale. That's our home team in football. We have a pretty decent build out there, but very few teams, I would say, that we've done this depth. However, we want to be a part of the local market where we're operating. We want to be involved in the community. We want to have like a more sort of genuine connection around like the major cities where we're operating. So, we have a lot of different team deals where on some level we're participating. We're trying to increase the enjoyment of the experience of going to games. Sometimes it's always a little different. Sometimes it's like a sports bar at the stadium. Sometimes it's just like a little bit of signage and activation stuff. But I'd say what we're doing together with the Cubs is an example of best in class like really, really deep, great, effective partnership.
Do you guys have any non-traditional ways that you're getting the brand out there and into, I'm thinking of just influencers, ways, I'm not, maybe not specifically individual people, but I wonder about, how you appeal to a younger generation of sports fan or sports bettor versus an older one. Are there differences in how younger fans are showing they like to bet or like to interact with DraftKings that may be different from maybe someone who's been around sports betting for 30, 40 years?
Yeah, it's kind of a mixed bag. I think people typically underestimate the average age of like DraftKings or a sports betting consumer. It's mid 40s. It's typically like a older audience, well educated, high income, the typical consumer. I think typically it's not new that they enjoy predicting things. It's not necessarily like only when you're mid-age or older that becomes a thing, but I think it's more just you're more established, maybe you have a little bit more like discretionary income, you're doing a little bit more hobbies, maybe your kids are out of the house a little more or whatever. So I think it opens the door for some more activities like going deeper in fantasy sports or like doing some sports betting when you're watching the games and things like that as you kind of get a little bit older in life. Like I remember when I was 25 or something and I was barely paying my rent and the last thing on my mind was like sports betting or something. But once I got a job and I started earning and I felt a little more solid, then I was like, yeah, I'll play this fantasy league, I'll do this, And so I think people grow into it as kind of like life cycle move on, you get a little older. Yeah.
Is there anything else like that most people, maybe there's misconception or most people don't know about sports betting or what, the typical bet that someone might make or the level of bets? I mean, is there anything else that, I don't know, that you're always telling people like, well, actually, sports betting is actually more like this, even though you might think it's like that? Anything come to mind for you in that vein?
Yeah, I used to think that there was a lot of like ridiculous stigma around it it wasn't rational, but a lot of that's gone away now with it being so open in many states. And I think most people don't understand the scale and how mass appeal it really is. Like, we're hitting a time of year where we're going to be settling 1 million bets every day. It's not like small, right? It's not a tiny little thing. Like, people are really seriously like participating in this, and that's one game. I mean, we have fantasy, we have multiple products as well, right? So it's just at this time, I think you're starting to see people realize like, okay, this is a pretty big thing. Everybody I know seem to be on one of these sites. Everybody's predicting stuff. If it's the Super Bowl, literally everyone, probably has a bet. If it's a Cubs game, maybe it's like half your friends. But it's really gotten into the prominence, I think, of sports culture.
Sure. Just looking ahead here at the future of sports betting, is there something what's the next big wave? Is there something that's not really big right now in terms of the types of betting or betting on certain sports or the way people are betting that you think 1, 2, 3 years from now will be a much more mainstream thing in sports betting? Anything come to mind?
Yeah, I think it's really just the depth of, like if you use the analogy of 10 years ago in Las Vegas, when it was the only show in town, when you were betting, you were just betting pre-game sides, totals. Maybe there was 3 dozen, 4 dozen bets on the board. You could make it all. If it's an NFL Sunday, we have 8,000 bets for just NFL, like that day on football, like propositions, everything that you could think of. Like you probably couldn't think of something to predict that's not on the site at this point. So I think the depth of like what you can actually kind of like get skin in the game on, it's almost anything under the sun. And I think it's also getting a lot more sophisticated in terms of like the complexity of things people can predict. Like people really love, for example, in the same game, making a whole array of things. Like this player will have a home run. This player will have 10 strikeouts. This player will lose the pitching game, whatever. Like a bunch of predictions all in one game. All these things are correlated. There's like the ability now to correlate and bet all these things and get an accurate price. It's like the modeling, the analytics, everything is so much better. And we're only a handful of years in, so I think that will just keep getting better. It'll just get tighter to the to the desires of the sports betting consumer.
Do you have a favorite prop bet before we wrap up? A favorite prop bet you've seen out there of something that was just wild that you said, oh, well,
yeah.
What comes to mind?
Well, I'm a Celtics season ticket holder, so I go to basically every Celtics game, and I like doing just like the first basket. I also like the 2-point versus 3-point, because you can do every play basically. So you can do like, will it be a 2 or 3-pointer on the next play, stuff like that. Right. And then a bunch of features. I like stuff, who will win like championship, and then you do like win totals and like a lot of things that are maybe more long-term predictions about how the season will play out. I would say
parlay that with like the length of the national anthem or something like that.
Yeah, you can bet on like pitch speed now in baseball. It's getting pretty deep. So
well, we're out of time, but Matt, thank you so much for a great discussion. Yeah. We'll be following you guys and watching the world of sports betting moving forward. Appreciate it.
That was great stuff. Thanks very much, guys. Really a fascinating business. On behalf of myself, Midwest Orthopedics at Rush, and our sponsors, thank you for watching tonight. Now next week, we'll be talking to Ishwara Glassman-Crain, the president of the Chicago Fire Soccer Club, one of only 4 women in management in Major League Soccer. Please tune into this one or any of the next 5 Summit episodes every Tuesday at 7 p.m. through November 8th. You can check out the Chicago Sports Summit lineup at chicagosportsummit.com. Now remember, it's not too late to donate to the Chicago Sports Summit. Have a good night and be well.
My favorite part about working in the warehouse is just the opportunity to come down every day and feel the equipment that's getting packed up. Really see the equipment go from something that someone's dreamed about having at a youth program to something that they're actually going to be able to give to their kids. Good Sports works with equipment manufacturers to take in donations of excess equipment that they have. Everything ranging from soccer balls, footballs, basketballs, to workout equipment and training equipment. We then take that equipment and we are able to distribute it to youth programs and schools across the country. Equipment vendors are the lifeblood of what Good Sports does. Without their support every year, we wouldn't be able to do what we do.
They're providing us with the ability to be able to service organizations throughout the country. Through their generosity, a lot of kids benefit in the long run.
Our team has grown exponentially recently. It's because of all our great partnerships with our equipment vendors and with the community organizations.
The growth means that Good Sports is servicing more kids, more organizations. Our inventory continues to grow, and so does Good Sports.
To move forward with conviction, vision matters. We are Forvis, a forward-thinking professional services firm that uses our unmatched vision to prepare for what's ahead. Our commitment to forward vision is delivered on an expanded platform and driven by deep industry expertise, vast resources, and innovative advisory services. Forward vision, it's in our actions and our name.
Here I am 1 year from college and I tear my ACL. They're telling me I'm not going to be able to play college football, and I'm thinking, that sucks. Team Rehab comes along and says, hey, let's get to work. They don't rely on routine programs. It was all about me and my dream to play again. Now I'm visiting Ivy League schools, and oh yeah, I'll be playing. I could have given up. I'm glad I went to Team Rehab because they didn't. Team works.
Team Rehabilitation. Visit team-rehab.com.
Every picture that I take is a prayer. It was only 15 months ago that I had a stroke. I was scared for sure, but these were the cards that I was dealt.
When Sal first came to Team Rehab, he was in pretty rough shape, but I knew we could push him.
The big thing that Jake has done for me is give me the confidence that I can do it. It's a partnership.
Sal's still a work in progress, but he's getting better.
A work in progress? I like the sound of that.
Team Rehabilitation. Visit team-rehab.com.
Over the last several decades, we at Midwest Orthopedics at Rush have depended upon our donors to help fortify our investment in translational research. Translational research is our ability to identify a problem in the clinic, take it to the laboratory, and bring it back to you, the patient, and affect change and improve the quality and outcomes of your care.
A lot of times we don't even see the benefits of our research come to the light of day in the clinical setting With the use of donor funding, we've been able to accelerate a lot of that. And one example is with personalized medicine, where we're taking patients' blood, spinning it down, and taking different factors out of it to treat different conditions in ways that we really never had available to us in the past. And this is a way to really move things forward and offer different options to patients that didn't exist before.
Through the generosity of our donors over the years, we truly have had one of the greatest impacts of any department in the country and had this effect both nationally and internationally. So thank you.
I've worked for a lot of really large organizations where values were fancy words on a pretty poster. At SCA Health, that is the striking difference. We live and breathe those every day.
They are always talking about patient care, high quality care. I've never heard of a company talk so much about their patients.
It is a company that consistently looks to improve. All I want to do is more for a company that takes care of me like that.
My voice is getting heard. I make a difference where I work. What input I have, they're looking at and they're listening to.
If you want quality of life, if you want room for growth, and if you want to be in a place where you know that you're safe and you know that you're keeping your patients safe, I would recommend it.
Putting in the work at SCA means being recognized. The promotions are there. The education is there. The next steps are there. I'm proof that the resources, the encouragement, the mentorship is there.
I've been here 11 years. It is the SCA values that have kept me here.
It's one of the first companies I worked for that has invested in me.
I come to work every day and I know things are going to go well.
I mean, it's the best company I've ever worked for.
They allow me to be who I am. I couldn't ask for anything more.